Hi.
Yeah. And,
Oh, wait, I'm in the wrong spot.
You and Justine?
yeah,
No, I'm.
doesn't that mean?
Oh,
Who did you
oh.
do this? Oh, Aaron did. Oh, the gavel.
I'm trying to do this one.
Yeah. How was your break? You might feel like it was like 4 years ago.
Yes.
Are we ready to start? Okay. All right. January Social Services, call to order. How's everyone doing? How was everyone's break that was 4 years ago? Seriously, Happy New Year, everyone. We're off to a rip-roaring start. Very excited to get excited. I don't know why we think everything's going to reset. It's just another month. It's just the next month. I always expect it to reset. So, can we get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda?
We have a second.
Second?
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have an agenda. Yes. All right, brief announcements. So if we have any announcements, we know Josh isn't going to be here. Justine isn't feeling very well. Happy New Year. Anything else?
No.
All right, that works too. Look at that. All right, so public comment. Do we have any public commenters that would like to go now? Not related to the agenda.
Hi,
So,
my name is Barbara Clutter. I live here in Davis. I volunteered at the respite center for about 6 months, going twice a week. And recently I understood from the staff there that they work for Communicare and their jobs weren't being continued. And I kind of was puzzled by that. Didn't know why that was happening. They also reported, and it's a concern to me, that of the clients that they were seeing there, they had more than would be serviced by the two shelters we have, the congregate and non-congregate. And so I just kind of wondered what the plans were to try to fill that gap, and why is it that all of a sudden we displaced Communicare there? Thank you.
thank you to the public commenter. All right.
Hello.
Thank
I
you.
can come back later. This is part of the agenda, but I was going to talk about rent protections and increases. Hello, I'm Katie. I rent in Davis. I'm a third year and I've been renting for 2 years now. And between my first and second years of renting, my rent went up by $200, which is 9.2%, just shy of the cap of 10%, which is a little ridiculous. And I'm really sad because my roommate, who is my best friend, had to leave and cram herself into a triple room, which was super tiny, just because she couldn't afford that anymore. And for numbers, the rent of our 1,100 square foot apartment was $3,095, and I pay $730 for half of a room, which is a lot for half of a room. And this September, my rent will be going up another $200, which is in other words 6.5%. And 6.5 sounds a lot better than 9.2, but it's still $200. So if you check the price on the apartment listing right now for what my apartment is, it would be an extra $450 of what I'm paying now. So that's like 15% increase. But just because I've been grandfathered in from my last lease, it's not going to go up as much. I feel like I should be grateful, but I'm not, because that's a lot. We're both college students and would really appreciate if caps were lower. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, do we have any other
We did receive, one comment from Alan Hirsch. I think all of you should have received that. His comments were about, that inclusion is social justice as it relates to the I-80 widening. He's provided a number of attachments, and all of those have been provided to all of you.
When does that come through?
January 3rd,
Oh, okay.
and it was sent to all of the commissions.
All right. Thank you, Alan. All right, any other public commenters at this time? No? All right, consent calendar. Does everyone have a chance to look at the minutes from December? I did. They looked pretty sweet to me.
There's one correction to be.
There we go. Okay.
So Commissioner Villanueva was also on the work thing.
We'll make that adjustment.
All right, any other edits, comments? All right, do we have a motion to approve the minutes with that one edit?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, we've got minutes. Look at us, just chugging along. Okay, I am very, very excited about this. I'll try to contain myself. So, we're turning it over to Iris to have our discussion about modifications to the Affordable Home Ownership Program.
Good evening. So good evening to the commissioners. I'm excited about this topic as well. I've been here not quite a year yet, and I've been very involved with the affordable for sale housing program. And when being involved, some things started to stick out that I thought, we need to address. We need to address it more in the immediate than in the latter. And I just wanted to kind of go over some of those things with you, and we made recommendations on some of the things we're hoping that we can immediately adopt to make the program more of an equity-based program with respect to who's being allowed the opportunity to purchase the affordable housing programs. There's not that many of them, but there is a lot of interest in them, and let's just move forward with. Okay, so the rare thing about the affordable housing program in the city of Davis is that the city of Davis, while we don't hold the ownership, we are a benefactor on the deed restrictions. So that is a rarity. A lot of cities don't have that kind of housing stock to offer. So that I wanted to eliminate that aspect. On the screen, there are roughly 9 communities that have affordable housing. Some of them, while all of them are all deed restricted in the first 24 months, some of them are not deed restricted in what they can do after the first 24 months. Again, the income is limited to 120% AMI for the corresponding household size. And I just listed what those figures are, as well as highlighted what the median income is for the city of Davis for the year of 2023. One of the biggest things is the assets. Assets cannot be greater than $250,000. Now, the thing that makes this interesting is $250,000 is really a lot of money, but the city of Davis's program does not stipulate that it has to be first-time home buyers. And that's one of the things I think that it should be corrected. It should only be first-time home buyers. I'll go through the staff report, but one of the things that I highlighted in the staff report is the amount of down payment that a lot of the transactions have, and it is substantially higher than what most first-time home buyers would bring to the table. And then the way that we look at gift, it's not in line with the way HUD would look at the gift. We'll go over that a little later too. just kind of wanted to highlight what some of the other cities do as far as affordable housing programs, kind of compare. As you can see, the city of Folsom has a program, it's deed restricted, it's restricted to first-time home buyers, it's restricted to the 50 to 80% AMI levels. The seller can only sell to someone at the same AMI level, meaning that if you bought a home and you were at the 50% AMI level, when you sell that home, you can only sell to somebody at that same AMI level. The city provides the eligible buyer. It is an equity share program, meaning that once you sell, the city would get some of the equity in the home. And there is a third-party verification for the income and assets. The city of Sunnyvale, theirs is a below market rate program. It's restricted to first-time home buyers. It's deed restricted. Households have to be eligible. The maximum AMI is 120%. Third-party verification. They have a priority preference. And the first preference is if you live or work in Sunnyvale. And the other one is you do not work or live in Sunnyvale, but you live and work in Santa Clara County. The city of Santa Clara has a BMR program as well. It's sales price restricted for 5 years. Their program, after 5 years, you can sell for market rate, but you have to live in it for 5 years. If you sell before the 5 years, you have to sell it to an income qualified eligible buyer. It's first-time home buyer program. It's low to moderate income. That's 80 to 100% AMI. Third-party verification. The city of Oakland has a BMR program as well. It's first-time home buyer. They restrict theirs to household sizes of 3 or more persons. Income limit is 120% or below. There's a home buyer education requirement in their program. It's deed restricted, and the buyer has to be eligible as well. So, if we go over the staff reports, we're asking that the city staff be authorized to clarify policy language to restrict the program to first-time homebuyers. We're asking that we be authorized to develop program policies to mirror HUD's underwriting guidelines. We're asking that we be authorized the program to maintain a wait list eligible to buyers according to the date the potential buyer was qualified to participate in the program. One of the things I'd like to point out for that right now is somehow in the initial stages of the program, it appeared that it was waitlisted. Somehow it morphed into an interest list with all types of people on the interest list, including realtors who potentially have buyers, but it proved not to be equitable because if I can give you an example, let's say I had an affordable home come up for sale today. It gets out into the community and let's say I'm a realtor and I have a client. That client can call in and the city put them on the interest list. And that person can purchase the home before somebody who might have been on the interest list for 5 years. So we're asking that the list be brought back to what the original intent was, and that's a wait list. So that the city is maintaining the wait list and you'll get the opportunity based on your priority on the wait list, i.e. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're asking to allow buyers 3 opportunities to deny the opportunity to purchase before they're dropped to the bottom of the list. And we're asking that staff is allowed the opportunity to establish a preferred lender and realtor list. Not so much a lender list, but really a realtor list, because that way we can ensure that the integrity of the program is being intact with the relationships we establish with the realtors in the community. There is no fiscal impact, as there are no allocations supporting the home ownership program at this point in time. I explained why we feel we need this. In 2023, the Affordable Home Ownership Program had approximately 12 for sale transactions closed. The profiles of the buyers are very different. Some, there's no way we ensure that they're first-time home buyers right now, but the profile would suggest to me that some of them were not first-time home buyers. We have a definition of a Davis first-time home buyer, and a first-time home buyer is an individual who meets any of the following criteria. An individual who has had no ownership principal in residence during the 3-year period ending on the date of the purchase of the property. This includes a spouse, a single parent who is only owned with a former spouse while married, an individual who is a displaced homemaker and has only owned with a spouse, an individual who has only owned a principal resident, not permanently affixed to a permanent foundation in accordance with applicable regulations, an individual who has only owned a property who is not in compliance with state, local, or model building codes and which cannot be brought into compliance for less than the cost of constructing a permanent structure. There are other general limits placed on potential buyers. Again, it's the 120% AMI level as well as the $250,000 in net assets. One of the other punitive things of our program is if you get a gift, we are considering that as part of your assets. Under HUD guidelines, that's not considered if you get a gift, it's not considered your asset. So we're asking to be able to adopt language that doesn't punitively say to a borrower or a buyer that if you get a gift, we're counting as an asset. Again, there's no general mandate on how much down payment a borrower must bring to the table, but within the city, and I looked at the transactions, generally speaking, the national average, and this is not for first-time home buyers, this is the national average for all buyers, is 14%. I believe when I calculated for the city, it was 23%. So it's just a picture of what it's looking like for the people that are buying the homes. We have currently, I just kind of gave a case study. Currently, there's one that I'm processing right now. The purchaser came to the table, the price is $337,708. The loan amount is $236,396. The down payment is $101,312. The bulk of the down payment is coming from a parent, but we don't have any parameters in place right now where we can verify that. So it's a trust. I was not able to ask for the documentation because we don't have parameters right now to support sourcing the funds under HUD terminology, but I would like to be able to add that to our guidelines so that we're vetting to make sure that the funds are not the borrower's funds. In this situation, it was a trust account, so as you can imagine, if she or he is the benefactor of the trust account, that would be considered an asset for them, and therefore they would not be able to participate in the program. The other piece to this one is they used a non-qualifying mortgage to purchase the home. A non-qualifying mortgage is a mortgage where you really can state your income or state your assets. You only have to produce verification for one of those things to show that you have substantial either income to pay for the loan or you have substantial assets to pay for the loan. That's not generally how first-time home buyers go through and purchase homes because most people don't have a wealth of down payment or a wealth of income as first-time home buyers. Just kind of gave a highlight over the documents that we use to support how the verbiage on the documents are listed, which allowed me to understand, okay, we're not really maintaining the standards necessary with what the documents are saying, so that in sales transactions, the documents indicate that the city is to provide the eligible buyer to the seller. And at that point, the seller can determine what buyer, I think it was 3 buyers that were supposed to submit, and they can determine what buyer they want to sell the property to. Right now, it's more real estate professionals involved in the transaction, and again, it makes it a little too competitive for an affordable housing program. I think that's basically it. So open it up to discussion right now.
Public comment? Is there any public commenters for this agenda item?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Georgina Valencia, and a few years ago, like you, served on the Social Services Commission, and I have to say, when I read the agenda packet for tonight, I was beside myself with excitement. Really thrilled at what staff has presented and what you are all listening to. This is the beginning of something that I'll say I and others started working on probably 8 or 9 years ago now. And first is the definition of a first-time home buyer. That has finally been put into code, but it's not a part of this program, so I'm happy to hear that it's going to be a part of this program, because I think, in fact, that's what affordable housing is all about, is to help people that normally wouldn't have an opportunity to buy. And so kudos to staff, kudos to you for listening to this tonight. I mean, it really is terrific. But there are a few items that I would like to make comment on. And one of the other things we talked about when I was on social services was having some kind of a wait or interest list for these houses to make this a fair and equitable process. And I'm not sure that saying, like we'll say the first person in line has 3 opportunities to buy a home. What if that person is only qualified for the number that we just heard this evening of 337,000, but the first 3 homes are 500,000, which there are affordable homes in town at that. So, you know, taking into account that there's going to be exceptions or issues that maybe aren't being predicted by just saying three times, you get a shot at it 3 times. I think there's also the situation that some people are looking for a specific house, you know. Oh no, I'm not going to buy this house. I'll wait for the next one. Oh no, I don't like that one either. I'll wait for the 3rd one. I'm not sure that's really what this program is about either. It's about, you know, equity. It's about fair housing laws. It's about giving opportunity. So I think maybe that needs to be in consideration on this idea of the wait list and the eligibility, and, you know, whether somebody stays on the list if they decline, or maybe moves off the list and has to reapply to get back on. I think that should be considered. So that's the other thing I would say is what I read in the staff report. This is really in consideration of resale properties. There are many more properties. I will tell you, I sold Grande Village. Those were new homes. They were new affordable homes. So if you're developing an interest list, a waiting list, then how are you going to use that list? Is it just for resale, or when a builder finishes their, you know, project, their affordable project for sale, are you going to require that builder to go to the interest list that's been developed by the city? I would say yes, that's the idea of it, but that hasn't been put into some of the verbiage here in the staff report, so I offer that idea up. The idea of having an interest, or not an interest list, but a list of preferred lenders and realtors, I think is a great idea. However, not every lender out there, nor every realtor out there has had experience with affordable housing, and it's truly unique. The lending guidelines and helping to get somebody qualified for affordable housing is very different. Deed restricted properties, not all lenders will do loans for deed restricted properties. So really, I think there should be some qualifications that these individuals would have, that they should have to demonstrate that they have had, you know, both the realtors and the lenders, some experience with affordable housing. And also, I think, protects those individuals that are looking for lenders and realtors to help them buy an affordable home. They're not as an experienced individual, so I think we need to really help them. It's a better way to serve them. There was one other thing in the staff report that I was curious about, and it was in regards to the buyer disclosure statement. And that is it informs the buyer of an exemption to an annual 12-month occupancy residency requirement. I read the buyer disclosure statement. It's part of the deed restrictions and resale agreement, et cetera, for Grande Village and several other product that I've sold. And I don't see that statement in there, so I would caution that if this is something that's going to be added to the statement, it needs to be added on a go-forward basis. Anybody living in a home now that signed their agreement, you can't all of a sudden change the rules on them. It's not a legal process. There's liability involved in that. What else? There's a few more things I could offer, but I think that's enough. Again, I just want to really say kudos to staff and thank you for doing this, and kudos to all of you for having this being presented tonight. So, thank you.
Good evening. I'm David Sandino, and I'm here to support the staff recommendation. I appreciate your hard work in delivering this to the commission. I also support the last speaker. I want to just add a couple things on my perspective. The reason we're doing this is because the normal housing market isn't working. It's not working in terms for the average citizen, low-income citizens, not promoting an inclusive Davis, diverse Davis. It's an issue. So the city of Davis in the past, we're talking decades, has tried to expand affordability through housing through different tools. This is one tool to have these kinds of legally restricted houses that limit how much someone can make when they transfer or sell that house. This is a good program because it allows folks to get the benefits of home ownership, to allow them to experience that, but also at a more affordable price. And once they've decided to transfer that property, those restrictions stay in place. There's other parts of the toolbox that this commission I know is very familiar with, housing trust funds, restrictions on rents. All those are positive too, but this is an important tool that I support maintaining, and I think that's what the staff report is saying. Now, why has this process not always worked in the past? And I refer you to a grand jury report that came out about 10 years ago that said that the city of Davis had these kinds of legal restrictions on houses, but the restrictions weren't being honored. And one of the reasons was because we didn't have sufficient city staff. Now we have a dedicated city staff, so this, to me, brings good opportunity for this program to continue to be successful. And I think folks understand the incentives with this program. The incentives are for this program that if you're an owner and you somehow forget that it's deed restricted, you can sell it at market price and you get a bigger financial benefit. People that are doing this, they're not being dishonorable, they're just lost in the milieu. And it's the same way with the real estate professionals. They don't know all the rules, and it gets changed from an affordable house to a market house, and we lose that. So we need this kind of supervision from staff and from you to make sure that this doesn't happen. So I applaud what you're doing. So let me just close by throwing a couple ideas out here. So I support what you have going on in Article 9A, Item 9A today, which is providing oversight of these kinds of programs. And whatever you can do with staff to make that more aggressive, to make sure, as Ms. Grace pointed out, maybe some transactions recently happened that took a house out of the affordable classification and put it in the market, to make sure that it doesn't happen. You're our eyes and ears for the city with staff to make sure. I'm an average citizen, I can't keep up with this, but you can. So I'm asking you to do that and support staff to make sure that doesn't happen again. And then the other thing that I'm going to suggest to you, as you're monitoring this program going forward and these kinds of housing, if you believe that it's successful, I think it can be successful, especially what I'm seeing now with the safeguards, that you may put this on the table for the city council for the next new subdivisions that are coming in town. You know about these, it's happening. Whether it actually gets approved by the council and by the voters remains to be seen. But as part of those subdivisions, there should be an affordable housing component. There's a bunch of ideas. All of them could potentially work, but here's an option that also should be considered: a legally restricted houses, whatever that number might be in the division. And to make it work, we need you and staff to convince folks that yes, we have the safeguards in place and this will be a fair, equitable program. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. All right, do we have any other public commenters? All right, seeing none, we can open this up for some discussion. All right, fellow commissioners, thoughts? I was like, I know one of you is dying.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Iris. I'm really thrilled that you're passionate about this. Overall, this is a great thing to be looking closer at the program as it exists. And certainly there's room for improvements. So mostly this is a really great thing. I just hope that we can help create the best programming parameters and look at each of these items and recommendations and maybe make this game, everything's kind of a game, there's rules of how things work, and we could play test it and make sure that it's running as well as possible. I want to start because I might immediately start to go out of bounds and, oh, this isn't this discussion, you might tell me. But I agree with one of the commenters that I believe, I'm not saying base of this, but I believe we need to maintain the inventory that exists. It came up in your report that there are times when, maybe it was other cities, that it's deed restricted at a certain AMI, but then that changes. Or just that we need to make sure it's the same AMI, or we want to, I want to. And that there are times when inventory has gotten lost, and I've now heard that from several people, that there are times in Davis's history where affordable homes were no longer affordable at some point. So, is there an item F that could be made as a recommendation at some point by staff and flesh out that there is also tracking of the affordable homes and the values and the resale values? Because it seemed like maybe some commenters think that that is important, but I don't see that in today's recommendations. I don't know if that needs to be stated or if it's already implied and we already are tracking it very well. My biggest worry is losing affordable homes from the market. So I'll start with that. I don't know if it's a question. Yes, it is.
So, it's being tracked pretty well, because the properties are deed restricted. So what happens is, if they want to sell, they have to contact the city on the deed restricted ones. There are some that are not deed restricted, and I don't know the history behind those, but at one point when they came to market, they were deed restricted, but somehow that restriction only lasted, I believe, a certain amount of time, and now they're only owner-occupied restricted, but they can still be sold for market price. But on the ones that are deed restricted, meaning that the city has to calculate the resale price, what will happen is if a title company pulls the preliminary title report on those, they'll contact the city. So a seller cannot get around the city in selling those. So those are pretty well tracked.
To follow up on Commissioner Winter's question, can you give us a count of how many are not deed restricted? So out of our overall portfolio, we know some are deed restricted and some of them were only for a period of time. So what percentage are we looking at that are going to be leaving the overall portfolio for market rate?
So I don't have a clear number on that right now. That's part of some of the research that I'm still doing. I just kind of wanted to bring this so that we could make it an equitable program sooner than later, but I don't have an overall count yet. Let me see, can I go back to the slide? Okay. So this listing again is all the homes that are considered in the affordable housing program. I can tell you that Southfield Park, there's about 67 units there, and they are all deed restricted. Then when you get into the other, Berry Bridge is all deed restricted, there's not that many in there. But then when you get into the other ones, some of them are deed restricted, some of them are not. Wild Horse, we have, which is interesting. Something came up today in Wild Horse. That one, if you're still the original owner on the property, it's still deed restricted. But once it sells, it's no longer deed restricted. So we would have some in Wild Horse that are probably deed restricted if they're still the original owners. But once the sale it's no longer deed restricted.
Quick question, what about Heather Glen? Isn't that community, is that under a different name here, I'm just not seeing?
Yes, and so I took the actual name that the documents are under. I'm trying to remember which one is Heather Glen. I think Berry Bridge is Heather Glen, don't quote me exactly, but I think Berry Bridge is Heather Glen.
Okay, so this is the name of the developments that these communities were built within?
Built under,
So this
yes.
is from like the original?
Yes, the development agreements are under these names.
I see, okay. Okay, so that is a little confusing, so I'm like, okay, right, some of these I recognize.
Trust me, it's
some of them-
confusing for me sometimes
I
too.
see, okay. Okay, I'd love to follow up on some of the other questions that we received from,
Just one comment.
Oh.
Grande Village is missing from this.
mhm.
Grande Village is 14 affordable units.
Grande Village might be under, so what you have on this list is the actual name that the development is under. It's probably one of these projects though.
It's under Grande Village.
Okay, so maybe there's some that are within there, so, yeah, thank you, Iris, for following this list, and thanks. Commissioner Valencia, formerly Commissioner Valencia.
Still Commissioner.
Yes, that's right, Commissioner Valencia, the Planning Commission. So one of the questions that came up was about how we chose to go with the HUD guidelines and not Cal FHA. And related to that, I know that Cal, FHA, I'm missing one, thank you. I know there's the down payment assistance program at the state level, the threshold for that's at 150. So I have two questions for you. How did we land on 250? Is that to deal with our local marketplace and the differences of the housing costs here? Just what's the rationale there?
I don't know. It's historical. I don't have the information on that. For me, that figure in 2024 is high. So I can only imagine when this was established, I think in 2008, that was high. And to answer your question, why HUD versus FHA?
Yeah.
FHA is HUD. It's the same.
Cal FHA is the same too?
Different funding.
Apologies. turn my mic.
So all of them underwrite to HUD guidelines.
They all use.
Yeah,
Thank you
HCD,
for
I think
clarifying.
one of them said HCD, but HCD doesn't do loans for, HCD is something different. They don't do loans for purchase transactions. But the FHA program, the Cal FHA program, and they're all one and the same. They all have the same underwriting guidelines.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. So I went straight into my questions without applauding, as some other people have done, the progress that this represents. And even in reading this staff report, this had more details in about the number of transactions that have taken place and more details about those transactions. I know from sitting in this seat for the last 5 years that Dana and Iris, the two of you, represent significant steps forward for our city when it comes to affordable housing. And I'm so grateful to you that you have put this together. And yes, I'm also grateful to the previous commissions that put their blood, sweat, tears, and public comments in place to make this progress happen. But, so for all of my clarifying questions, I want to be really clear that this is exciting. I'll give the floor after giving that.
You don't want to finish?
I have more questions, but I can wait. Go, don't take your turn, please. Sorry, questions, jump in.
Commissioner Wong-Tam, do you have any comments? No? Oh, see, they're handing it back.
Okay. So to the question about the preferred list, what would, do you have ideas of what would go into that? Who would develop that? Is this, what does that look like? Because that does seem really important to make sure we have the best expertise negotiating these deals in place.
So I think it would require a vetting process for one, because again, this type of program is specific to a certain demographic. So it would definitely have to be someone who is familiar with affordable housing programs. And specific to this region as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be Davis, because Folsom has affordable housing programs. Not certain if Sacramento does, but somebody that would be very familiar. I think that it would be appropriate for staff to interview certain professionals within the area to get an idea of who has familiarity with these programs. But I think it's very important to kind of etch it down to 2 or 3, because again, we don't have that much volume. 2 or 3, not necessarily lenders, so to speak, more so the realtors, because what I've found sitting in the seat since I've been here is that's where some of the equity is lost, is when you're dealing with the real estate professionals, because again, we were allowing them to be on the list, and if they had a client or knew somebody that had a client, that person was getting service before people who were on the list. So I think it's just making sure that the parties or the entities that will represent are supportive of these type of programs.
And we can do, what we do is an RFQ process. So we would essentially lay out all of the experience, all of the things that we would ask a realtor to already have in place, demonstrate why they're qualified to participate in this program and be a part of our pool of realtors. And so in the RFQ, they would know exactly what would be expected of them, how the program would work, and then how we would go about selecting them to participate. So we do an RFQ.
One of the other things I want to point out on that piece too is, right now, again, the transactions are being handled more like market rate transactions. So in market rate transactions, there's commissions on both sides. If we get to a point where we're saying, okay, we're going to do a preferred realtor, we can have the full confidence in that person to handle the complete transaction. And we can minimize the cost associated with the transfer of the home by doing that.
Does that also run the risk of there not being, okay.
So again, in this, I know what you're saying, I know exactly what you're saying, but in this transaction, again, the city is the one that would be responsible for bringing the eligible buyer to the table. So I don't think you run the risk of the fiduciary responsibility, because there's not as much detail in these type of transactions that a market rate transaction would have. That we set the sales price, so there's no negotiations for the sales price, so to speak, because the sales price is the sales price. In a market rate transaction, there's more negotiations involved in a market rate transaction. We're setting the maximum sales price, so it's not going over that. Like I said, I feel in this scenario, it would be more so being able to control the cost associated with the seller having to sell the home.
Thank you. It's very, very helpful. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to reiterate what everyone else has said, and thank you so much for dragging us, kicking and screaming into 2024. I mean, it's been a long time coming, and it's refreshing to see, just to see laid out all of the other municipalities, and, you know, that it's very unusual for us to not be here yet. So thank you for bringing us here. I had a question about the ordered list. How is that going to, or has that already been started, or how are we going to handle it, or do we start from
So
zero?
we haven't started it yet. I wanted to get the blessings of the commission before. We've kind of purged the list, though, to separate actual buyers from real estate professionals. With the preferences, though, it would be the intent of city staff to determine where this person qualifies, so that you wouldn't have a scenario where if somebody only qualifies for a $337,000 home, they would be given the opportunity to purchase a $500,000 home. So they would be ordered based on what they can afford. So if, again, if that person who's at 337, if the house comes up to 337, you would be the first person to get that opportunity to buy that home. I wanted to also illustrate that we're not, so some cities say that when they get put on the list, they have to be ready to buy. And it would be my estimation in those situations, those cities have more inventory, so they come up more frequently. For us, I think it would be a hard thing to tell somebody you must qualify right now. We can get an estimate of where you are, but to say you have to be ready right now, I don't think that would be, there would be a whole lot of people not on the list. So again, we don't know what a person's situation might be if it takes 5 years to get to their name. We don't, so they might have to say, well, I'm not in a place right now where I can buy. And I don't think it should be punitive to them to say, well, since you're not ready right now, we're gonna drop you to the bottom of the list.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Winter?
Several follow-ups, what first? So, we went over, that Cal HFA also uses HUD's underwriting guidelines, and, another one didn't apply to the situation. Are there other underwriting guidelines that could apply that I haven't heard of? And, you know, as a commissioner, I might have been willing to read the underwriting guidelines if it had been in the packet, and I don't know, it could be 1,000 pages long. So maybe I wouldn't be willing to, but that is one of the recommendations I'm more hesitant on without having the opportunity to know more. I have a lot of faith and trust, absolutely, but I'm interested in if there are other underwriting guidelines, or if there's a succinct version that I might be able to digest in the next month.
So, generally in mortgage lending practices, so what I'll explain to you is HUD is the standard, right? But HUD mandates their underwriting guidelines based on people who want to participate in HUD programs. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, I don't know if you've heard of them before, but they have underwriting guidelines too. But they generally mirror the HUD guidelines. They might be a little bit more flexible because you don't have the same kind of income criteria in the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac transactions. But generally speaking, for first-time home buyers, the underwriting guidelines would be the same. We're not really asking to change much because we already get third-party verification documents on every transaction. The only thing is we wanted to be able to shore up. We get a lot of transactions that have gift funds, as you can imagine. And not being able to source those gift funds can be problematic. One, in the case study, I pointed out that it was a trust fund. Well, if this individual who's buying is a part of that trust, then that would disqualify them because they have access to money. I don't know how much is coming out of the trust fund, but it was, I think it was $140,000. So that's a substantial amount of money. The other thing with not being able to source funds is in the mortgage lending practice, it's how money can be laundered. So we're not even ensuring that, we're not even ensuring in our practices that the money has been sourced and is valid funds. So that's the other drawback to that. And I would say that even if it were Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae, their guidelines are going to be the same when it comes to sourcing gift funds.
Thank you very much. Another question was for one of the recommendations to authorize staff to establish a preferred lender realtor list to ensure equitable access. Would it be possible to see the criteria that would be in place, you know, before approving it? Or is this, you know, going to be looked at, or can it be looked at as, you know, starting to establish and starting to create parameters? I'm just saying I'd like to see it again when it is fleshed out.
So to answer that question, absolutely would be, I would think it would be appropriate to bring back that list to the commission before we say, yes, we want to move forward with this preferred lender, preferred realtor list. So that could be one item that's pulled back and saying, well, we want to be able to hold off on providing the preferred lender or realtor list before it's presented to the commission.
Yeah, are even the criteria for developing the list before it's developed? I don't know, maybe it's already been starting to be developed.
No, it hasn't.
Okay. Oh, one more question. The interest list, first I've ever heard of it, sounds a little scary that that was happening or possibly likely was happening. But I don't know. I can't really speak to whether it's a good or bad thing. It just sounds scary. In these recommendations, if we accepted them, is it implicit that that is going away and that it's only potential home buyers themselves?
So it's my belief, when I looked at the historical context of the documents, initially it was a wait list, it was not an interest list. Where this interest list thing was adopted, I don't know, it could have gotten lost in translation at some point, because if we are having a true interest list of buyers, there should be no place for realtors to be on that list. When you look at other programs throughout other cities, they're called wait lists, they're not called interest list. And that definitely gives you the opportunity, if you're going on that list, to understand that your position on the list is secure. It was alarming to me because and give you an example, we had a transaction, I think it was in October, and this is when I decided, when I started thinking, we need to tweak the program a little bit. So we went through and we sent out questionnaires to everybody that were on the interest list to see how long they were on the interest list. We have people who were on the interest list for as long as 7 years and weren't being informed of properties when they're for sale. So people who would call in would get the opportunity to purchase before somebody who's been on the list for 7 years. So I just felt like, okay, we need to have a more equitable process.
And one quick comment, one of the things that we're working very hard on is to make sure that all of this is very transparent. So we're going to be talking with the realtor community, we'll be talking with the people that are on the existing list. All of this information will be available on the city's website. So there will be a lot of opportunities to engage so people understand what's happening and why it's happening and how it's impacting them, because we have had a lot of interest recently, people looking at these properties and going, well, how can I be a part of this? I'd like to buy an affordable home too, but we have to explain to folks that these are not homes that are really designed as investment properties. We know that the prices look fantastic, but they're fantastic because we're making these properties available to people that have barriers to home ownership. It's not an opportunity to increase a portfolio or to have rental income. That's not what this program is about. But we'll be doing a lot of educating so people understand what's happening and why.
Gratitude upon gratitude, really. This is, there's no critiques here. If I wasn't here, I would bow out to you and your work, and I'm sure I'd be happy with the outcomes. I just want to help try to make it as good as possible. One other thing is the recommendation for 3 opportunities to decline an available home. I actually have the same thoughts almost as a commenter. Several thoughts. I'm just not sure that's the best number. I wonder if 2 opportunities is better, and that led me to consider what would happen if there was only 1 opportunity. I'll try to think this out. One is, it's kind of like a game. It's like a high-risk game. And is that the intention? And somebody else said it, is to play out and wait for hopefully the next home's better, and then, it's not. And then they have one more chance to wait for a home that they really want in the neighborhood they like at maybe a price that's, I don't know, there's reasons. And just what it was that, do we want to create a high-risk game or not? Also, I think it was said, and I hope this is a question, is it worked in that it has to be a home they can afford? If it was above their price point and they got 3 houses that were above what they could afford, is there a way to verify what they can afford, and would those not count against them? I think I heard that you said yes.
So one of the things we instituted in October is we created a questionnaire. And again, the questionnaire is just, trusting the answers that they put down. Because we're not going to go through and qualify somebody for something we don't have right now. So it's one of the questions is household size, income for the household, And that, based on that, then we can determine, okay, what would this person qualify for, right? Down payment, we ask that question, what is your potential down payment? And at that moment, we can determine, kind of get a good idea of where they can qualify for. We haven't really instituted it yet, but the vision is, once, let's say the person qualifies for 500,000. Once, and they're number 2 on the wait list. And number 1 on the wait list only qualifies for 330,000. And a home comes up for 500,000. Well, number 2 is gonna get the first opportunity to say yay or nay. But again, it could be that something in number 2's household changed. So right now, they can only qualify for a $330,000 home. So it's punitive to tell them, well, since we had a 500, you can't afford it, we're dropping you down to the bottom of the list. That would be kind of punitive. So I just feel like there should be some kind of opportunity for them to decline and be able to keep their position on the wait list. If it's 2, if it's 3, I don't think that would make a big difference. But to just drop them to the bottom of the list after 1 is kind of punitive.
Very good. My intention is also, other than the high-risk game, is just to make sure that it's a lean and fast program. And doesn't take up more staff time and tracking than it needs to. So just looking out for everyone there.
I also support having the 3, someone could be scheduled for a surgery or they're in the middle of elder care. I mean, you said this point about the household changing, the life circumstance changed. If you're on a wait list for 5 years, a lot has changed in our lives in the last 5 years, right? So I'm comfortable sticking with the recommendation as it stands, commissioners, and I'm wondering if we might be ready, Chair, because looking through recommendations A through E, after this conversation, I'm happy to support all of them. And welcome,
Welcome,
Commissioner.
Commissioner Villanueva.
Thank you. Apologize for
No. But I want to make sure we get everyone, do you have any, I mean, you just got here.
I know, I
Any
did have,
thoughts or comments? Did you have anything written down that you wanted to?
I did, but I feel that I'm so late in the game that it might be something that's already covered and I don't want to.
No, but I think you should,
repeat the
I
whole
think we
thing
should
again.
have it for the record, if there's something you wanted to say about it, related to it.
What-
And we can tell you if it's.
Well, sorry, gather my thoughts here. Part of what I was trying to understand was the whole process from beginning to end and how that looks like for me, for example, if I were to come in and I'm interested in being part of this list, what does that look like? And then while I'm in the list, what does that look like while I'm waiting to go from wherever I am in the list to top? Is there a recertification process that would look at my income if it changes while I'm waiting? And same thing for other people. So it's kind of, how does that look like? And then again, when I finally become a buyer and I buy the house and I'm now in the house, what does that look like as far as making sure that I am still following the affordable housing programs policies for staying in the house as an owner? And then at the very end of it, even when I decide to sell, how does that look like now as a seller as opposed to a buyer? So my questions really are, it's more of an overview of the whole process. So I'm thinking that that's been covered already. So I won't belabor it. I'll just look at the recording. So it has been.
If you wanted to add.
I'll-
That'd be great.
So, great question. When you first, so the list, I have a housing authority background. So when I think of wait list, wait lists are designed to be equitable lists, meaning that everybody on that list gets an opportunity for whatever that list is supporting, right? So when you think of a wait list in this concept, the design is just to make sure that initially you qualify in the overall scheme, meaning you don't have more than 250K in assets. You don't have more than 120% AMI for the household size that you're indicating. Now, again, things change depending on how long, right? So if I'm a young person, I'm just putting my name on the list, by the time I get called, I might have been a household of 2, but now I might be a household of 3 or 4, so things change. So it's not really to do a hardcore qualification initially, but it's just to get some idea of where you would fall with respect to affordability. Once you have the opportunity to get a home, then yes, city staff would do a hard qualification, meaning verifying income, verifying assets, and things of that nature. When you're in the home, there is no criteria for what the income has to be. There's no recertification of anything. Once you're in, you're in. But generally speaking, with first-time home buyers, the general guides to first-time home buyer programs is that you graduate, right? So you might get a smaller home, but now your family's growing, you need to sell the home. So when you're ready to sell, the city then steps back in because you first notify the city that you're selling. At that point, the city would then determine, okay, who's on the list and who qualifies. We would send them the top 3, and they would determine from there, okay, who are they going to sell to. The seller still has the right to determine who they want to sell to. But it would have to be an income qualified household. So the city is the one that would send them the income qualified household. That is written into the loan documents right now. The city generally has 60 days to send them a income qualified individual. Currently, right now, the city's not doing that because, again, the program morphed into something probably it wasn't really designed to be. But the city definitely wants to get back into taking some control on how the transaction is being handled.
So as a follow-up question, if you are not on one of the top 3 slots, you will not be notified? Is that how it works, or?
Correct. That's how it should work. Right now, I'll say this, right now, it's a situation where, let's say me and you are looking at, I've been on the list, and I've been on the list for 5 years, and you have a realtor friend, and your realtor friend says, oh, I found this, I know this property's coming up for sale. Right now, the way it stands is since you have a connection, you can get the house over me, just by calling the city and saying, put my name on the list. So, again, we want to bring back the equity to the program. And so yes, only the top 3 would get the first right to say, yes, I want the home, right? And whoever's chosen, then of course will be taken off the list. But if one of them says, no, I'm not interested, then we would go to the 4th one. So we would always submit 3 names.
So in that situation, it may not be that the top 3 people are actually qualified in the sense that maybe their situation might have changed while they were waiting. It's just that they happen to be in the top 3 at that point.
Correct.
And then how does the pre-approval or the loan processing the loan process go with the qualification for the program?
So we don't give it any loan, so we just have some loan documents that are recorded against the property to secure the restrictions on the property. And what we still do the income verification, we still do the asset verifications. So we will require third-party documents. So if they have a job, we require pay stubs. If you have a bank account, we require bank statements, 3 months worth. So we take all that information, determine where the income is, we take all that information, determine where the assets are. And if they meet those parameters, 120% AMI or below, 250K or less in the bank or in assets, then as far as we're concerned, they qualify for the program. And as far as the loan goes, we ask for their pre-approval documentation from whatever lender that they're using. So we do review pre-approval documents.
I do have one other question. I was trying to figure out, in the example that you have here for one of the purchases, for the case study, it looks like the house purchase price was $337, but then you noted that the current median is $797. So are we talking about the same property here? That $797 could be sold for $337 under the affordable housing? Is that how it works, or?
No, we just wanted to give you an idea of
Just
what
an
the
idea.
average sale, what the average median price for a home is in Davis. And you can see that the affordable home is much less
Right.
than the average price is. We just wanted you to be able to understand what the difference is and why people are so interested in these properties.
Yes, okay, that clears up something for me, because that's a huge difference. But I am curious about something though. I know that there's the median income qualification, and then there's the down payment. But how is the eventual mortgage to income, the monthly mortgage income affordability factored into all this? Like, for example, in this situation, in this case study that's included, if you do the calculation, a general calculation, it looks like this person would then have $2,300, I think is what I calculated for how much they would be spending, which is, given the income that they're making at $67,000, it's like 44% of their income, which to me sounds very unsustainable. It's not affordable. So I mean,
You're
guess I don't know
actually
when-
proving my point. So that's why I use this one as a case study, because you're actually proving my point. When you look at this, it's not traditionally what a first-time home buyer would look like. So I think that just drills home the importance of making sure that we're serving first-time home buyers. This person right here used a non-qualified mortgage. So on a non-qualified mortgage, that means you either have one or the other, meaning asset or income, and you don't have to verify what you don't have, right? So in this particular case, for us, in this case, they indicated the down payment was $101,000, but they received $149,000, I believe. But for us, the purchase transaction only shows $101,000 down payment. But again, that's a substantial amount of down payment. If you look at the loan to value, it's only 70%. Generally speaking, on qualified mortgages, they're not going to allow you to have a loan to value that is the same as somebody only putting down 3%, right? Because we can't verify everything that you have. We can't verify either the income or we can't verify the asset. So that's why it's non-qualifying. That's why on non-qualifying mortgages, the loan to value requirements are different, as well as the debt to income ratio. So what you just alluded to was about a 47% debt to income ratio. If we adopt HUD guidelines though, then that would allow the city staff to say, this does not fall within the guidelines, right? So we're protecting the affordability of the program.
All right, commissioners, do you have any other comments? All right.
I do. I'm not ready for a vote of bundling all 5 recommendations, and I'm wondering if we could unbundle them. And I'll explain, for the authorizing staff to develop a program policies to mirror HUD underwriting guidelines, I'm sure that a yay vote is probably correct, but I would just like a month to be able to look into the guidelines myself. Just an honesty policy. Hard to recommend something that I know so little about, willing to be outvoted there. However, E, authorize staff to establish a preferred lender realtor list. I'd rather see the program and what the criteria would be before authorizing it. So If there's a way we can unbundle them and, maybe I'll be outvoted on some, that's fine, but.
May I clarify your question? Do you want to basically push off the underwriting items, but for E, it's that you want to see the list before we approve it? Or,
The criteria for who can be on the list.
right, I think, so my understanding, okay, so this is a good clarification. When we authorize them to make the list, I understood from the conversation that we were going to come up with a set of qualifications. Would you bring that back to us? Once we, yeah,
Yes.
I see. So not a list of the names of the realtors, but a list of the qualifications. Got it. So that, I do agree, Commissioner Winter is not as clear as it could be in the way E is phrased.
I'm sorry, that just reminded me of a quick question I have regarding that. Are they, when you sell, is this the list that will now get the notification of the home that's for sale? Or will the seller also be required to go on MLS and list it that way? Is it?
So really, it should be the seller's choice. I don't know where that came in, because if we're determining who's eligible, there's really no need for an MLS listing,
Right.
because the MLS listing opens it up for everybody.
Right.
So there's no need for the MLS listing. So in my guise, I think that would go away.
That makes sense, thank you.
And Commissioner Winter, if you would phrase your motion, so that you would say which items how you would prefer to have the vote go, and then the commission could determine, if they would accept your motion, to essentially adopt everything except for B and E. That would be your motion, and then they decide.
Yes, if E was, rephrased such as Commissioner Enos suggested, and that we understand the purpose of it to be, then E, I'm okay with E as well. Then it would only be B that I would like one further month to study some HUD underwriting guidelines.
Was that a motion? Sorry, was that a motion?
I can't put that in a motion, but can we, it's a question, can we vote on A, C, D, and E? And then B?
I would actually like them to be bundled.
Very good.
We're talking to the experts here who've worked in many different areas in housing and affordable housing. I think we're in good hands.
We're more than willing, though, to send you a link to where you could view all of the guidelines. We could even send you a link to where some of these other programs are, so that you can do your own study. And link to the HCD website, and link to County, to all of those, so that you can see what other processes look like. That HCD wouldn't have, but we can send you the link to the HUD guidelines so that you can read through them.
Can I add one more thing, another request, please? I am also interested in checking out the various documents that are part of the process. So I don't know if you all have requested that, but I would like to be able to review them as well, just to see what's on there.
The list that's included in the staff report, is that what you want to see?
Yes, it's on page 3.
Yeah, page 3.
To the extent that you can, I know some of them are probably can't have a escrow instructions, for example, if there isn't any sale going on, but for the rest of them, if there's a template, if there's anything that we can review, I would appreciate having those.
So that's not a problem. The only thing I would do is to caution you, because again, when you look at the documents, the program does not mirror the documents right now. So it's not a problem to send it out. And if it's something that's private, I'll redact it from it, but just keep in mind that when you look at the documents, it will be illuminated very well that the program is not mirroring what the documents say right now.
That's fine, thank you.
How does that feel to you?
Great.
All right. Do we have a motion on the floor?
will make a motion to approve recommendations A through E with the modification to the phrasing of E, that it would be a preferred list of qualifications. Is that accurate, Commissioner Richards? So we see the qualifications on the list, yeah. Can I get a second?
Second. Okay. Oh, I did, well, cook. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. 2024 is off to a good start. Yay, Davis. That's good stuff. All right, moving along.
I have the next item.
Okay, great.
As the commission knows, staff went to council to request that we be authorized to update the previous homeless strategic plan, which was 2019 through 2017 through 2019, it was. And so council authorized us to move forward to retain a consultant to start the process for our homeless strategic plan. Staff has contracted with a consultant by the name of RDA. RDA provided support to Yolo County's homeless strategic plan, so they're very familiar with the area and the region, and with some of the items that the county executives would like to see, and now they're going to help us develop our plan. Right now, they are taking a phased approach to how they're going to complete the plan. It's being provided in phases. Phase 1 is really launching the project, so that is getting under contract. It's reviewing current documents that are related to the old homeless strategic plan, looking at other related homeless strategic plans. They're doing some debriefing with a number of local organizations that helped to develop the first plan. So that was phase 1. And also they are in the process of identifying people to serve on a steering committee. The steering committee will be responsible for helping to develop the strategic plan, helping to develop the goals and the objectives, and laying all of that out, laying out the finalized plan to the city council at the very end. So right now, as I said, they're working on phase 1. Phase 2 will be what they're calling a landscape analysis. They're reviewing all of the secondary data that has been that's related to homelessness here in Davis specifically and surrounding us. So that would include previous PIC counts. It would include HMIS data, our Homeless Management Information System data that we are getting from HUD. It also includes talking with providers that are working with our unhoused community about the data that they're collecting. So they're looking at all of that data. They're planning a community meeting that will really give us an opportunity to do what we're calling a SWOT analysis. That's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats here in Davis related to homelessness. So they'll be conducting a community forum to do that. And then they're also developing a community survey. There'll be a broad community survey that will go out to kind of everybody that's working in the unhoused arena. But they'll also be doing some very specific surveys where they'll be talking directly to people with lived experience to kind of get their feedback as well. And once they've done that, they're going to take all of that information, kind of digest it down into a final a draft product, and that will be phase 3, where they will be working on strategy and action planning. So after they've done their best practice research, then they'll be working with the steering committee to come up with some draft goals and draft objectives. They'll offer some strategy planning sessions where they kind of roll out this draft to different arenas in the community so that we can get feedback from the community about, this is what we're thinking as far as goals, and this is what we're thinking about as far as objectives, and making sure that the community is on board with that. They'll provide us more technical assistance, and then finally they will deliver a brief the The steering committee, RDA will provide the brief to the steering committee will approve the draft, and then they will bring it forward to you for comment, and then once that happens, then it'll move forward to the city council. So I'm asking today, because we're still in phase one, it's a lot of stuff that they're doing, but we're still in phase one. They are looking for participants on the steering committee. We would like to ask for one commissioner to be assigned to serve on the steering committee. When we have the first meeting of the steering committee, which will be virtual, the committee will decide what its schedule will be, when they will be meeting, what that would look like with RDA. None of that's been decided yet. They're just trying to identify people to serve on the committee. So I said that I would bring this forward. And so the request is to assign a commissioner to the Homeless Strategic Plan.
All right, any public comments? All right, seeing no public commenters, let's discuss.
Can I ask a question? What's the timing of that project?
Sure. We expect to have the plan fully developed by June 30th. Yeah, so we'll be done. I think we will adopt the plan by June, but we'll be taking it to council in early June. The drafts will be happening sometime between, where are we looking at? Our timelines have kind of changed. The draft will be coming forward sometime between March and May.
The draft would be in March before the
No,
series or after?
So the draft will be going to the steering committee to kind of look at, but by May, the steering committee will have finalized that document. And then in May, they'll bring it to you, and then by June, we'll be going to council with it. So the whole thing will be done by June.
That's a very fast pace for that level of community engagement. That's an ambitious timeline. Yeah.
We've had feedback that it's actually too long of a time. But we've been, in order to make sure that the community feels like they have an opportunity to be engaged, we've said that we'd like to make sure that we don't come back until, it's not finalized until June. So, we started this work actually in October. So, we've been working on it since October, but it should be completed by June. And they've had 6 meetings so far with stakeholders, previous stakeholders. They're reaching out to individual stakeholders, but they've met with the Davis Homeless Alliance and Dove to talk about the previous plan. They've met with Downtown Streets team, they've met with Stake, they've met with St. Vincent de Paul, they've met with Heart of Davis. They've got meetings scheduled with Davis Community Meals and Housing, with Communicare and Respite. They'll be talking to Sutter Health and UC Davis Basic Needs. And so they're right now in this phase, they're doing a lot of outreach just to the provider community. But once we get the steering committee going, there will be more opportunities for the community to kind of chime into.
Do we have any interest amongst our commissioners or any questions, comments?
I'm very interested.
All right. Commissioner Wedra, I think you are our designee.
Thank you very much for the honor.
Thank you very much. I will let them know, and we'll make sure that we'll be sending letters out. So I'll make sure that they have your contact information so they can reach out.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
You'd mentioned the pit count, and at our last meeting, you'd mentioned notifying the commission about this upcoming pit count. So I don't know if now is the time to mention the date and.
Yeah, well, I'll be talking about that in the comments at the social services update.
Perfect.
Oh, where is this thing?
All right, great. Annual work plan. Let's take a look. Is it not
So
going on?
I have it's embedded, so if you want me me to just forward the slides when you're ready? Do you have it? Okay.
Just want to make sure. Okay, so Commissioner Villanueva and all participated in this subcommittee to take a look at the previous work plans that we've done in the past 12 years. And the process was to also look at our commission's charge. So based on our role, it is our responsibility to advise the city council on all matters related to social services. Sorry, I missed the slide.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. And at the behest of the city council to create community forums for education, discussion, debate, public commentary, hold public hearings and community forums that fall within the charge of social services. Serve at the request of city council to be a liaison between city groups and around social services and the city government, coordinate efforts from the city to recognize volunteers and their contributions, advise the city council on community development block grants and other social services related federal and state grant programs, and coordinate with other city commissions on matters of mutual interest. And so thinking about what we were charged with, we wanted to think about what we have done in 2023, as well as what we would like to have a discussion as a commission about moving forward for 2024. Next slide, please. So we looked at the city council's existing goals, and knowing that they either are about to soon be meeting to identify 2024 and beyond goals, this may change to fluctuate to that. But they have 6 overarching goals, and we tried to tease out the different objectives to see in small ways, we might address little things here and there, but at the heart of it, ultimately the ones that we most align with are the first goal, objective 5, to increase, maintain, and improve the supply of affordable housing, as well as goal 1, objective 6, reduce the number of individuals who are unhoused. I'm just going to skip ahead really fast and then I'll backtrack to this. Also on goal 6, about fostering excellence in city services, there are 2 objectives around creating valuable information for the community and creating open dialogue. And so we felt those 4 areas seem to be the most in line with the way that the commission operated and drove how we wanted to spend our time for this coming year. So as far as our guiding principles, we want to make sure that our content, the discussion,
I got it.
excellent, sorry. As far as our guiding principles, we want to make sure that our decision-making is well thought out, thorough, data-driven, evidence-based. We cite an environmental scam that happened a couple of years ago, but also whenever we have conversations, hearing out the details. We wanted to make sure that moving forward, that subcommittees would make sure that they're advancing and informing commission objectives regarding social services. We wanted to make sure that the commission work is taking input from the larger community, whether it is staff, community members, public commenters, and we wanted to think about how we align with different stakeholders within the city, and that can be different commissions, UC Davis, other bodies, and then reflect emerging needs. So we're going to talk about, in the next slide, about some of the things that we've done in this past year. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Sure. Next, okay, that's the right slide. So we summarized the activities that we had last year. And the big one was, of course, providing the oversight to the Community Development Block Grant and the Home Investment Partnerships Program. We expect to be doing the same this year. We also reviewed affordable housing plans. We issued affordable housing policy recommendations. This was with the inclusionary zoning, which I think was a big part of last year. The subcommittee reviewed and provided input, recommending the leads for development proposal evaluation. And then we also had a subcommittee for the DJUSD That was the one that then recommended to the 2x2, yeah. And then we had the Tenant Protection Subcommittee, which is still ongoing, and we'll be presenting tonight. And then the liaisons also is ongoing, and we received educational presentations from the temporary affordable housing ordinance, the community care, the stake, and the inclusionary housing. Okay, next slide. Oh, yes, okay. So work plan objectives, these are also some of them were also from the 2023. We chose the ones that applied for this year to aid city council and social services providers to meet the needs of the unhoused through research and recommendations on funding, programs, and policy, to positively influence the expansion and ensure the preservation of affordable housing, and to identify, promote, and raise awareness of social services programs and activities. The last one, we had a pretty good discussion about the other social programs that we want to raise awareness about beyond affordable housing. And that's, Deanna here will talk about it a little more.
So, thank you. Starting with just thinking about what are some of the other areas and what was the result of the 2022 environmental scan. So housing, obviously, as you can see here, was the #1 thing. But then there are also all these other things that were named. So food security was the second thing, financial insecurity. Third, I won't list off all of them since you all have them in front of you, but just our thinking and discussions when we were writing this up and thinking about this was just how can we take on some more of the other issues that the community organizations raised. Thank you. And then here's the other slide with the other issues that were important to the community. So the #1 thing, or the top 2 things, was improving availability of and access to services and linking clients to services. So those, I also, again, won't read through all of it, but those were the 2 that had 11 respondents that indicated that were some of the most important things. Next slide. So the way that we thought about this year is kind of in 3 different parts. So one is to lend accountability and follow through to some of our work that already was done that Justine read through. So one recommendation or proposal is to reference the work plan on a quarterly basis to assess if we are sticking to it and following what we said we would set out to do. And again, this is a draft, and we would look to all of you for input and feedback to see how do we want to formulate this work plan for the year. And then to follow up on past subcommittee recommendations and meetings. We had talked about how in some cases there's recommendations made, and then we don't necessarily always know what comes out of it, or maybe some things just kind of fall off the radar for various parties that were involved. So it's also just have something there so that we can reference to follow up on past committee recommendations, things like the inclusionary housing, rural development, proposal rubric that we had submitted committee for. I don't know what came out of that. And again, tenant protections, which we'll be talking about, and DJUSD 2x2, down payment assistance, housing trust fund. These are just some of the things that maybe there might be something we're not thinking of that came out of last year's that would be great to get updates and just follow through on. Next slide. The second part is to continue with the current work that we're doing, which is advise and raise awareness of social services issues to the wider Davis community, and continue to receive and promote educational presentations. And let me know, Judy, I don't know if these were new ones that we are recommending that we hear about, or if these were ones that we already heard about and are just examples of the types of presentations that we would want to receive. So about student housing homelessness, child care access, affordability, affordable housing and homelessness, and other issues that emerged from the 2022 environmental scan.
I think when we discussed it, that we certainly have had different folks come out and talk about things like student housing, homelessness, affordable housing and homelessness, perhaps a little less about childcare access, and so that might be an area to learn more about.
And again, we look to you all to provide your feedback on what issues we would like to receive more information about and take up as a committee or a commission. Then we would, of course, continue oversight, oversee DBG and home programs, and conduct issue analysis regarding city policy and programs. So, like best practice in affordable housing rental ordinance, inclusionary zoning. So some of the new things that we would like to add on is, as per the charge that we had, I believe in the earlier slides, one of them says to collaborate with other commissions to strengthen the recommendations to city council as needed, and to kind of really, and then as a next point there, it says to clarify the path for the commission's effectiveness. And so how do we go about collaborating with other commissions? Exactly, what is the path? Some of us are new here, and to me, it's not totally clear how we can collaborate with other commissions to increase our effectiveness and strengthen our recommendations. And likewise, to clarify just a path to commission effectiveness and any applicable restrictions. So there are some restrictions that limit how we can act and what we can do, including the Brown Act, and that is like a gray area to me at least. I know that there's, we watched the videos in the beginning, but I would like, I think some of us would like some clarity on what are the restrictions and what is that avenue of action that we can take. And some proposed new subcommittees include researching funding sources beyond CDBG and home. So if these are the ones that we're charged with, other funding sources that we can possibly consider to increase or amplify the impact of social services in Davis. Also pursue other additional critical needs, such as food insecurity, or others that were uncovered in the 2022 environmental scan. And then a better understanding of city versus county funding services and opportunities for collaboration. So one of the things that I'm curious about is, what is the Yolo County doing in terms of social services? Are there funding opportunities there? Is there networking, promotion, events, things, all of the things that we are also charged with? I assume that there are aligned charges in their institution as well. So just having a better understanding of what are some of those opportunities.
All right, public comments. Do we have any public commenters? Okay, seeing none, let's discuss. Work plan. Thank you so much for putting all of that effort into that. That was really good. Thank you. One thing I think that we should remember is that moving forward into the fall, we're going to have a pretty significant change to the CBDG and home program, which I think is going to address a lot of these issues. Working on or hearing from agencies beyond housing and homelessness. I think it's going to completely change the fabric of how this commission works. I do. I don't know if you can speak to that at all, Dana?
Collaboration.
So part of the charge in allocating the funding out to the community is really having a really good understanding from the community about the different issues that are trending, right? So what we're asking the commission to do when we start the new funding process, we'll be asking you to we'll do a deeper dive in trying to get more applicants to come out and talk about what the programs that they're offering, and then come in and solicit us for funding. And as a part of that, we're going to ask you to interview those applicants. It'll be a process. So everybody that applies will come before this commission, talk to them about the application, how much it's going to cost to do what they're doing, why they're proposing to do what they do, what trend is it based on, and what they would do with that funding. So it really would require a lot more involvement. You'll be hearing a lot more from people that are not just in the homelessness arena, but anyone that is really interested in moving forward with some kind of support from the city would be coming to you. So that would all be under the city BG process, and potentially under the home process too, for home applicants too.
May I ask a clarifying question on that? Were those interviews going to happen via a subcommittee where they've come in and do a series of all of the applicants are going to be interviewed here? Okay.
So the example I give is Previously where I was, we would do, once all of the applications came in, you would be given copies of all of the applications. You'd be asked to read the applications, including the budgets, the staffing plans. You come up with a series of questions that you would like to ask of each of the applicants. And then we would where I was, we would set aside a Saturday where everyone would come in and we would have each applicant come in on a schedule and make their presentation. And then the committee would really, after all the presentations were made, we take more time to then come up with our recommendations. Staff would have its own recommendations about what organizations they'd like to fund and at what level. But then the commission would also say, here are the applications that we would like to fund and at these particular levels. And then the negotiation would begin with, okay, so what do we want to bring forth to council?
So yeah, so I think that's going to be a substantial part of our work plan, maybe 2/3 of it for the year, because it's going to be a completely different process, and I think that we're all going to be very engaged, and it's going to be awesome. Do we have any other comments or questions, or?
I appreciate you expanding our work focus beyond just housing. You know, housing is a passion of mine, but these other issues are obviously so critical to our community, so thank you for that. And I'm ready to adopt the work plan if others don't have other comments.
I think you need to make a comment about your real passion. It's childcare access. Judy stands on a soapbox about childcare access.
I'm very excited that childcare access is on the agenda, yes.
Also, as mentioned earlier, we do want to wait for the city council to come back with their updated goals before we finalize, to make sure we're still in I think it's happening this month, or next in February?
Very early in February. They're meeting with the department heads first, and then they'll have a separate meeting, probably the second week in February. And then we'll know for sure when they'll have their.
So when would we receive those goals in order to update this and finalize it?
I'll have to check, because once they've had their retreat and they've come up with the goals, I have to find out what the process is for them to kind of bring it for council to adopt. So I'll ask that question, find out what the timeline is.
I can't imagine, sorry, that they're going to be very, very different. Would it be okay to adopt the work plan now, and then maybe we could amend it with the goals? I think that's the way to go.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we were also talking about wanting to see what the rest of the commission would like to have. So it's not just the three of us putting together a work plan, because I think part of our discussion was that, or at least for me, the work plan reflects, in a sense, what we are all interested in doing as individual commissioners. I could be wrong, because that inspires us to do the work, and then hopefully at the end of our 4 years, we can look back and say, I did something. Quite often when I hear from other people, friends, colleagues who have served in the commission, I hear often that they feel like they didn't really get anything done. And I don't want to feel like that at the end of my 4 years. And so I feel that the work plan needs to have everybody's desires and wants, or whatever it is they want to do, and to the extent that it's possible. Obviously, we have, bandwidth that we have to figure out. But anyway, that's just kind of my way of saying I would like to have input from other commissioners as far as what you would like to do beyond what we've given. Or, yeah, there you go. And you don't have to answer that right away. But maybe that goes to the point of having more time to put it together, or maybe amending it I don't know how that would work.
Well, I appreciated you building in that we come back to it, and it's more of a dynamic piece. So perhaps as a recommendation, we adopt it as is, but through that process of checking back in on it, we're able to bring up new interests and be responsive to new situations, issues, needs that arise in the community or that we wish to make sure are represented. So, if that works for you.
Right, and that's something I've always liked about this commission is our ability to be nimble and to respond to emerging needs. We can do that. Yeah, I mean, because things come up and that we didn't expect to come up, and they come up and we handle it, and it's awesome. So, yeah, so I mean, I think that keeping it broad and knowing that we're gonna come back to it, as Commissioner Ennis said, I think it allows for that level of flexibility.
Should we make a motion to add it to a quarterly agenda? So like the first month of the quarter?
We can put that on the long range.
Do we need a motion to do that, or can we just do
I
that?
don't think we need a motion. Do we need a motion?
We need a motion, or we can just do that? Okay.
Well, I don't know if it's totally relevant to the work plan, but I know in thinking about the year, we know that we always see the forecasted calendar during the meeting, but as far as having, a digital version or something that we can just continue to reference versus we vaguely remember what should be forecasted in head, I think that would be helpful to think in the future.
And having that publicly available, so folks know when things are coming up.
So add it to the packet that goes out.
Yes,
Friday.
yes.
As long as we update it at each meeting, then, instead of just pulling it up on the screen, I'll make sure that we add it to the packet as well. Okay.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Well,
Do we need to, oh, you have a comment?
sure, just because it's kind of like, what are some desires, things that may not be on here. I just want to represent people that I've talked to in the community since being on the commission, and one person was concerned about nursing homes and care facilities and the quality of care, and that just leads me to wonder, what oversight there is and how that's going, and if that should be a concern. Concern of another person I'm trying to represent. And then also having maybe care facilities, even mental health care facilities, that enough of them, maybe in the county or in the area, so that people, some in affordable housing, for instance, or disadvantaged, don't end up having to be taken out of our community when they finally need more care and aren't able to care for themselves, or even assisted living in that type of situation. Having enough resources locally so that these people in the community aren't taken away from, everything that gives them a sense of comfort, simply because we don't have the resources. A couple of things that came to mind.
And here you're referring to like some services are only available through Yogo County, which tends to be in Woodland, for example.
I have one friend who, had a mental health crisis, several, and then finally he disappeared. And he's just, I forget where he is, but it's not in Sacramento, it's not in Yogo County, it's farther away. And just today I was speaking to someone else who had a very similar concern, that there's not enough care of certain types. I'm being very vague, but it seemed like my moment.
And if I can make a quick comment about that, there are some things that are under the city's purview and that we've got influence on, and then there are some things that are mandated services that are managed by, like you said, the county. They're the mandated service provider for things like health and human services and public health, and so all of those departments have there are departments that deal specifically with families, there's a department that deals specifically with aging, a department that deals specifically with migrants. It's just, there are a lot of different things that they're resourced to handle, but we can always ask them to come and make a presentation about a specific topic so that we can hear what's happening. And like you mentioned before, there are other regional commissions. There's a commission on aging that we can always tap to kind of come in and talk to us about, well, what happens when people move into senior care? What services are available to them? How does that work? So we can always reach out to the subject matter experts that have that responsibility to come back and speak to the commission, and then they may be able to talk about how they can collaborate with local government on some of those topics.
We can add to the work plan then, something about maybe receiving, educational presentations about the landscape of nursing facilities to try to start understanding better what that is like?
Yes, it can be on our list. If,
Or do you have another suggestion for how we can take that on?
no, I just don't want to, I don't want to presume to prioritize it yet, but it could be on the list.
Yeah, I think just to learn more about it and then take action steps. And I think with regards to what you were saying, Dana, about how the county has certain things that they oversee, so that's, we did recommend a subcommittee that, and that basically does a bit of research and comes back hopefully with a presentation on what are the opportunities, how does it work with the county versus the city, so hopefully that will help us understand that better as well. For those of us who don't know.
It can get very complicated. So it's really hard to kind of follow the dotted lines of who's doing what and, you know, whose purview is it under and what does the city do and what's the county and then what are we doing as a state? There's a lot. And right now there are a lot of moving parts, you know, because there's so many issues that are trending. So it's hard to follow.
Yeah, and also in terms of working with other commissions, Kelly has said this so many times, it's like permanently embedded in my brain. Sometimes that's not up to us. You know, we serve at the behest of city council. So city council sometimes, I mean, if they see a need for it, they can facilitate that, but sometimes that doesn't. That's one of the parameter issues that we have to be mindful of.
Is there a way for us to get educated on that too? Because I know that you've said it and I've heard it before and I've heard it from them, and because it feels like this thing that we can't do, then we end up not doing anything. And so I'm wondering if there's a way for us to have a more in-depth look of how, or what can we do given the constraints?
I think you had a very good idea when you asked about the Brown Act training. I mean, that's something one time we did on a regular basis, and COVID. So it hasn't happened in a while, but we can always ask for a Brown Act training so they can come in and explain, you know, who can you talk to, when can you talk to each other, what are the parameters around that. So that's something I can work on now so that we can see if we can get a Brown Act training on the schedule.
That would be great.
Okay.
And it goes hand in hand with the, you know, the other proposed, that is kind of grouped with it, is just clarify a path for effectiveness in any way that, you know, we think might be effective, while adhering to like restrictions like service.
And also what Commissioner Wedger just brought up, I mean, part of our job is to keep our ear to the ground and know what the community is talking about, and he's just a perfect example of doing that. I mean, sometimes it feels like we're not going very fast, but we are getting a lot done. I mean, this is not an ineffective group.
We didn't want to imply that at all. I think it's some of, like, at least Justine and I who are new, we don't know how to necessarily, and I'm starting to learn that, and it's like, through subcommittees, and there's so much impact and effectiveness happening, so we don't at all imply that that's not, and I actually thought of that word, and I was like, is that gonna offend some of the folks who have been so effective for so long here, and that is not at all them,
Well, I know, I mean, I felt the same way when I first started. Sometimes it just takes like a minute to get into your group. So, but yeah.
I think it'd be helpful too, because I think in June we'll be getting new, or July, sometime throughout the year we'll be getting new commissioners as well, so I think to have like a path that we can point to, be like, this is how it works.
Can I ask staff a question about, I know for another commission for human relations, they have student ex officio positions, and so I'm curious to capture more of a youth perspective and youth engagement. I'm just curious, is there some bylaw somewhere that allows that particular commission to have that position? Can that be something feasible if the commission wanted that to happen? I'm just curious if to incorporate more voices.
I'll check your bylaws, but you can always amend your bylaws and amend the seats. So if it's something that you were interested in doing, and then if we've got other commissions that do have reserve seats for students. Let me find out how that happened, but I would assume that if you amended your bylaws to say, we want this many commissioners, but we also want one of those seats to be reserved for you, you could do that.
All right, so do we need a motion, do we need to adopt the warrant, do we need to do anything? Motion?
No, it's up to, this isn't an action item, you don't have to vote on it, it's just what you'd like to do, so.
Okay, good stuff. All right, any other comments, questions? Nope, all right, moving on. All right, long-range calendar.
Hopefully you can see this.
This is so plain.
All right, so we're in January now.
Can you make that way bigger?
Yes. Yeah, we don't need to see all the extra stuff like that. No. That's smaller. That's not good. We're just trying to move the whole thing over. There we go. All right, so, one of the things that you were hoping for is a quarterly update, to look at your work plan. So we can bring that, we don't have much left for the year, but if you wanted to look at that again in April or May. If you looked at it in May, that would give you a chance to think about, the entire calendar year for next year. And I always do things on a fiscal year, so I'm always working from July to June. So our new fiscal year would begin in July 1. So you could set it up so that beginning July 1, you would have your work plan update. Or you could talk about it in May, decide what it's going to be in June, and then have every 3 months we'll look at the work plan again. Does that work? So I can put it on here. That would be an informational item. This is the 24. And I'm just going to make a note. And then we have one report for February for Empower Yellow. Are there any other liaison reports that we've got that anyone wants to add, or are we good on that?
I think that the next final version of the tenant protections report will be on the 26th, so we're presenting it tonight in draft form, and then we'll be finalizing it, so that's the last presentation before we go to council.
That would be February, let's see. Are we taking action on that item? Are you gonna ask for?
We're gonna ask for, and I see that you have the fair housing practices tenant landlord disputes. So, yeah, that's well timed across them.
If we need more, I'm meeting with my person, with state, Friday, so I could always move mine up.
Okay. I'm gonna be to February.
And is there any way we could put a placeholder in for the homeless strategic plan in May?
Absolutely.
And did you want something on respite center?
Yeah, they said they were doing an update
Oh,
tonight, but,
gotcha.
but yes, if we could have a placeholder for a respite center, especially after, member meeting tonight. And that could be in February as well.
That actually will work well because we will be, our RFP process will be complete then. I can tentatively in June, keep our fingers crossed, the PIP count, we may have data back by then. It usually takes kind of a while to scrub the data, but we'll put it on there. Is there anything else that anyone can think of that they'd like on there?
No, in March for the CBDG, yeah. That's good, that's good.
Okay, and I will make sure that that goes out in the packet next month.
All right, any public comments? All right, seeing no public commenters, here we are, here's the big show. Thank you guys for sitting all the way through this. I know you've been waiting, we put it at the end, so you had to stay. All right, handing it over to you.
Deanna's gonna kick us off.
All right. So we're going to talk about tenant protections. There was subcommittee myself, Judy, and Justine. We met several times, and I joined kind of late, so they had a lot of information. And let's see, next slide. So our task was basically to, we'll go right back, it was our task to review the current tenant protections and as well as review other cities' ordinances, see what is the status of the rentals in Davis, review the Davis housing ordinance, what's happening in the state and other cities, and then recommendations and best practices from outside experts and resources. We put together recommendations, which was still in process. And then we'll go over some next steps. Our charge was in the summer of 2023. The Department of Housing and Social Services provided a presentation by Iris Grace on the overview of the City of Davis Housing Municipal Code Review of 1805. The Social Services Commission voted to research potential pathways for strengthening tenant protections based on a review and analysis of current ordinance and programs in Davis, state legislative context of ordinances in other cities, and guidance on best practices and legal pathways from outside experts.
Thank you, Deanna. So we have provided for you a highlight here of what the current status of the rental market is in Davis. And our sources are the census and the City of Davis website, as well as the apartment vacancy and rental rate survey, and also the housing element. We have some slides on the housing element coming up as well. But what we should understand is that 55% of the residents of Davis are renters. So when we talk about tenant protections, we're talking about advancing protections for more than half of our city. So within that, we also need to understand that the vacancy rate is an issue that shapes the market dynamics. We have a 0.5 to 1.5 vacancy rate. That means that if you get evicted, finding another place is extraordinarily difficult. There's a very high chance you'll be leaving the community. If you have to leave an apartment for reasons due to cost or other factors, finding another apartment is an extraordinarily difficult act to achieve. We received testimony from members of our community that say that they are sleeping in the parking lots of leasing offices in order to be first in line to sign leases. That's not something that we should be tolerating in our community. So with this in mind, understanding what the context is, that our neighbors are facing struggles that are based on the market dynamics, we might wonder, what can we do as a commission? So as part of our charge, and after the wonderful presentation given to us by Iris Grace, we took this on, so if you could please go to the next slide. The definition of what it means to be overburdened is if more than 30% of your income is being spent on rent. Now, this is from our housing element. I believe it's from version 3, but I think the same slide was in all 3 versions. And it shows that a visual map of who is overpaying. Think about where you live in the city, and then think about who's to the left and to the right of you with your address, and imagine what they're dealing with if they're in the red, if they're in the deep orange, if they're in the yellow. Imagine the choices that they're making between buying food and paying for childcare, or whether or not they can afford to get new tires on the car. Maybe they're going to make it one more winter, right? Because that's what's happening with our neighbors, and you can see that it's pervasive across the city. Can you go to the next slide? A common refrain is that, oh, well, this is because of the students. But the truth is that the students are the lifeblood of our community. And we have a diverse community that has seniors, that has individuals with disabilities, and students as well. And if we think about, oh, this is because of the students, we're not seeing the full picture. The housing issues that we're facing in Davis are happening statewide, they're happening across the country, and it is not just because of the students. And if the students weren't here, we wouldn't have the vibrant community that we have. But you should also know, in terms of the data, and you'll see that this is from the UC Davis Student Housing Affordability and Security Report. It's slightly out of date because this is from the 2017-2018 version, but approximately, they represent about 45% of all of the renters. So 55% of the renters in Davis, 55% of Davis are renters, less than half of them are students. And then there's this other interesting figure that of that percentage, 33% are within the rental units that we have. So that means that we have students, as the public commenter mentioned tonight, where they're jumping into locations where they are potentially facing overcrowding. Okay. If we could go to the next slide. So our charge is to review the ordinance, and I'm going to pass it over now to another member of our subcommittee, and we're going to be tag teaming all the way through. Commissioner?
Sure. So we looked at the Davis Housing Ordinance, which is Chapter 18. And for tonight, really the bulk of it that we're looking at is Article 18, Section 11, which is the residential rental dwelling units, the requirement for registration and inspection. But I'm going to backtrack a little bit and say that if you go online to the website and look at the Rental Resources Program, you will see that there are educational resources and materials, educational materials and resources that are there. Some of them include the model leases, the guidelines, and FAQs, and service provider listings. What this also summarizes basically is the rental property registration requirement, which we see in Article 18, Section 11, as well as the rental property inspection program. So I'm not going to go into the details of this chapter, but basically what this tells you is that multifamily and single-family rental units are required to be registered with the city before they can be rented. This registration process includes giving owner contact information, description of the dwelling, when they change ownership. There's a registration fee that needs to be paid, the responsibilities of the owners and the tenants as far as repairs, and as well as move-in inspections and city inspections for single-family rental units for compliance with state laws and regulations. So the big thing really that we want to point out with this is that this program is underutilized. If you look at the list of the registered units on the website, there's probably about 3,500, I think is what we came up with, but it's way below the estimated 14,000 units that are eligible for registration. So we flagged that because this is one of the things that you don't have to create. It's basically here already, but it's being underutilized. So that's one of the things I want to highlight. As far as the state law, what I want to talk about AB 1482, which is the Tenant Protection Act, but I also want to preface this part of the report by acknowledging that we did receive a lot of support from the legal services of Northern California, who provided us with really a more nuanced reading of this law because it's pretty, it's pretty complicated. And not just, they provided us with a reading not just of the Tenant Protections Act, but also the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995, which limits the rent caps that local jurisdictions can do. So, like I said, very complicated, so I'll try to be succinct as possible. I've had some time to marinate the information in my brain, so hopefully what I give here is just what we need to move forward. So AB 1482, this act has two relevant sections. There's the just cause requirement for eviction, and then there's the rent cap. Under the just cause requirement, the tenant has to have lived continuously in the unit for 12 months before they can be protected under this act. And if so, then they cannot be evicted unless there's just cause. So just cause can be found if the tenant is at fault, so meaning to say they're at fault, they didn't pay their rent, they breached some contract term, they're a nuisance, whatever, they're at fault, so they can be evicted. But the other way that they could be also evicted is if there's no fault, they're perfect, but the landlord needs to move in. The landlord needs to make substantial remodeling so that the building could be compliant. So in that case, if it's a no-fault eviction, there has to be a relocation benefit in the amount of 1 month's rent that the landlord has to provide to the tenant. So that's very important. So that's the just cause requirement. And then the other part of this AB 1482 is the rent cap, which is either 10% or I think it's 5% plus the annual CPI, Consumer Price Index. I'm not sure how that calculates, but the point is that there is a cap. So I just want to make sure we're clear with AB 1482, just cost requirement, at fault, no fault, if no fault, relocation benefits, and then state caps. So, of course, there are always exemptions, and in general, for both the just cause and the rent cap, they do not apply to newer housing, 15 years old or younger housing. They also don't apply to dorms and certain single-family homes and condos if they're not owned by a corporation. So single-family homes are exempt unless they're owned by a corporation. So I bring this up because at the very initial stage of our research, we were concerned about the ADUs and the buy-to-let leases, which is relevant to our community, and we wondered if those were exempted. And so we found the answer is that they are protected, and they are protected as long as the units are 15 years older, or 15 years old, or older. So I hope that's clear. But even with those protections, we still have a lot of tenants that are not protected. But the good news is that as far as the just cause requirement of AB 1482, it does not preempt the local jurisdictions from taking more protective action. So this is, again, another one of those issues that we made sure we get right, and we consulted with the legal services of Northern Cal, because we want to make sure that the local jurisdiction can actually enact more protective measures. And as we can see, there are several municipalities that have already done this, and I will go over a few of them. But the problem that we have is that as far as rent caps are concerned, the Costa-Hawkins Act prevents the local jurisdictions from applying rent caps to properties dated after February 1, 1995, and properties that are alienable separate from other units like single-family homes and condos. So as far as those properties are concerned, we cannot impose a rent cap on them. However, where we can, where the rent caps can apply, we can make those rent caps more protective. So in some, we can strengthen our tenant protection ordinances by making sure that they apply the just cause requirements on more exempted dwellings, and then also making sure that they're more protective. And then I'll go over what that might mean for us too. And then additionally, where the rent cap applies, we can make sure that those are more protective for the tenants. So next slide, please. So as an example of a more protective just cause ordinance, we looked at Fairfax, which does not require 12 months occupancy where the tenant is protected, and where it's a no-fault eviction, the landlord must provide 2 as opposed to 1 month of relocation benefits, and then more if there's an elderly tenant or children or tenants with disability. In Larkspur, the just cause protection applies to your tenants after only 30 days of tenancy, so it doesn't require a full year. And again, if it's a no-fault eviction, there's 3 months of rent as opposed to 1, or 5,000, or whichever is greater. So I won't go over too many, but all this is just to say that there are possibilities of tenant protection in the context of the state's Tenant Protection Act, even with the limitations of the Costa-Hawkins Act. But we also considered other ways to create tenant protections beyond the just cause requirement and the rent cap. And Judy will further talk about our collaboration with outside experts to look at other things beyond the state law.
We were inspired by those other ordinances, and some of them we went through as a subcommittee. Also, I want to give credit to Julia Moat, who's not with the commission anymore, but was one of the members of the subcommittee before, who was with us when we were gathering our early ordinance review, and then the help provided by Legal Services of Northern California. We included in what we wanted to have in the packet the letter that was provided by Legal Services of Northern California. We had 3 sessions with them, and they provided us with this written set of recommendations, including some of the references to programs that we weren't aware of through our review, so they were truly an irreplaceable resource. The recommendation highlights, and I believe that they will share this themselves at public comment. We've selected the top 4, but they have many more pieces to this, so this is truly just a highlight reel. But they suggest that the City of Davis consider adopting a rent control ordinance that is more protective than the TPA, as Justine just broke down for us. They also suggest improving code enforcement's effectiveness in enforcing code compliance complaints. Also, better regulating the city's rental market through the resources program, which we're going to talk about more in a moment, and considering establishment of a non-judicial review board. And that's one that we're particularly interested in discussing with you tonight. If we could go to the next slide. Our top 3 recommendations at this stage in our process are the following. We have come to the conclusion through 6 months of review that the best course forward for the City of Davis to improve tenant protections within the narrow bands that we have are to pursue rent stabilization, strengthen just cause eviction provision, and create a non-judicial mechanism through a rental body. So what we mean by this is that, as my colleague just shared, we can go lower than that 9.2. As the public commenter described tonight, $200 this year, and $200 another year. But we know that wages aren't going up at the same rate, right? And we know that the pressure created by that movement creates neighborhood instability. We know that the trauma index in early childhood, one of the pieces of that is high pressure to relocate continuously, frequent moving, right? So in the classic studies of why rent stabilization ruins the rental market, which you've seen, what they're referring to there are the blunt instruments of rent caps that were used 30, 40 years ago, and they're not responsive to the current market that we're in. They also did not necessarily look at the other aspects that we now know are part of a thriving community, referring to neighborhood stability and other types of access to services, the community threads that are cut too soon when the rent increase goes up so far that a child can't stay in the school that they're in right now, right? So For reference, we also checked using the other cities on what the best practices are, what's working. The city of San Jose has published many annual reports highlighting the results of what their program is. And right now, they're at 5%. Now, we have written to them for more details, and we also are reaching out to see if we can have a meeting with them to have more information, not just on how they run their rent stabilization program, but also on the third point, which I'll get to in a minute. So with this access to rent stabilization, that's helpful. That's a good thing. But on its own, it isn't enough, right? There are many other properties that don't land under this ban, but that could be possible. And that's why just cause eviction is so important. As my colleague shared, there could be many, many reasons why a landlord calls for the end of a lease, right? Just cause and no fault. But what we would say is that in this setting, when our vacancy rate is 0.5 to 1.5, and we know that families and individuals do not have another apartment to go to, cannot necessarily take the time off work required to camp out in front of the leasing office, right? We suggest that based on the stress of the market, it should be effective at move-in, and we need to have higher relocation benefits that more closely match true costs. Now, you'll notice that we haven't specified exactly what the rate should be, and we haven't specified exactly what the true cost should be, because we believe that that would be the job of the subcommittee and city staff doing another round of research, right? This is the direction that we think we should go, but those details matter, and they need to be part of an overall housing policy that is thoughtful about our affordable housing program, the services we provide, and how we support our community through policy infrastructure like this. One of the ways that we can do that, support our community through policy infrastructure, is to establish a rental body similar to a commission like this, although we are bound by the Brown Act, so that may not be the best way to do it. Right now, if you have a dispute, and I'm very happy that it's coming up in March, that we'll have information about that in more detail. But our understanding is that if you have a dispute, you are limited in your options for how you get help. There are resources available, but when it comes down to court, that is a very difficult mountain to climb for a family that's already struggling. They may have it in them. Say the fight's worth it, we need that money, we're gonna get legal help, we can't leave this apartment, or we need that money back, whatever it is. And there are services such as our friends at Legal Services in Northern California. And that's wonderful that we have that, but we need something before that point. So our recommendation is that the city look into establishing a rental board, not an elected rental board, but an appointed, mixed with city staff, where our neighbors and those that are property managers and landlords who also need protection, who also need transparency and clarity in these laws, and also need a space that doesn't require going to court, to have their disputes mediated in a public setting, okay? So that is our recommendation. How are we gonna pay for this? So as my colleague said, we have a program that's already there. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. And we know, based on our calculation, and the way that we did that, by the way, is that the units that are registered are publicly posted on the city website. It's about 42 pages. You can look up the addresses. We did a quick Googling ourselves and said, hey, a lot of the addresses that we know are rentals aren't showing up. How far off of a gap do we have? So we did the math, okay? And we found, as my colleague already shared, that we are significantly below the eligibility point for registration. Now that is, I'm not going to assume that that's because landlords just aren't doing it. I think it's because people don't know. I think we have a lack of awareness that this is the ordinance right now. Over time, I think there was a big push at the beginning and it's fallen back. So there can be a grace period where we bring landlords and property managers back in to get registration rolling again. Right now, the city collects $35. That's the fee. That's the registration fee. Our public commenter just said something around the lines of, I believe it's around $3,000 that you're paying. Thank you. Sorry to call you out. So if you think of that $35 a year spread over a collection of rent at $3,000 a month, it sounds like an increase in that fee may be appropriate. We checked with what fees are in other cities and they range significantly. Some are close to 55, some are much, much higher. So high that we honestly were a little confused by San Jose's fee structure, because I looked at it again and was like, that's much back, there must be a mistake here, it's gotta be a comma missing. So if our registration fee, imagine a scenario where we have full registration and it was $100 per year, that means the city could be collecting $1.4 million annually. Imagine what that would do for the Housing Trust Fund. Imagine how many people we could hire in the Department of Housing and Social Services. Imagine what you could do with the Affordable Housing Program. The possibilities with a funding stream like that would be a significant game changer for our city. And it's through enforcement of an existing program. Even if we were fully collecting the 35 from all of those eligible units, that would be a game changer. So, for us, this is the top priority, is getting the rentals that are in the city registered, okay? Now, one concern that we discussed many times is, what if there are landlords that are concerned about registration? Maybe they know their place isn't quite up to code the way it should be, they need some help, and suddenly they just say, everybody's out, evict. And we inadvertently increase our housing crisis. So we think it's very important that as this program gets rolled out, if it's adopted, if City Council chooses to go this way, that there be a grace period established for the benefit of current tenants and the good faith in landlords and property managers that want to make sure that their buildings are up to code and want to make sure that their fees are going to be used well and appropriately and that they're registered right, I think is what I'm trying to say. So in this good faith moment, this can be rolled out in a way that is safe and builds the success of the community by increasing the revenue that we so desperately need. So if we could go to the next slide. I'm going to pass this to my commissioner, and quick pause. Did I miss anything in our recommendations? Okay, all right. Then we're gonna wrap up and take public comment. Go ahead.
All right, so the draft request for the Commission's motion for council is to direct city staff to develop a set of revisions to the ordinance for stronger tenant protections and take the Social Services Commission recommendations under advisement for the revision process, and direct city staff to enforce the rental registration requirement and utilize the fees collected to support the Department of Housing and Social Services and the Housing Trust Fund. And next steps. So Iris is going to be holding two kind of office hour sessions this week and in 3 weeks from there. She's going to be having interviews with tenants and gathering feedback, and we would like to incorporate that feedback into our recommendations. And then the final subcommittee recommendations for improving tenant protections and the request for the motion of council will be presented at the February meeting.
That ends our presentation. I think we'd love to hear public comment.
Good evening, members of the Social Services Commission. My name is Ella Beckman, and I'm a staff attorney at the YOLO Office for Legal Services of Northern California. First, I want to thank the subcommittee for reaching out to us. Second, I want to summarize the points in our comment letter sent to the subcommittee. We encourage the Commission to recommend that the City Council improve the city's tenant protections. The lack of deed-restricted affordable housing in Davis makes it extremely difficult for low-income residents to find and keep housing. Ultimately, the long-term solution to this housing insecurity requires the development of affordable housing in Davis. However, until then, the city must act now to address the needs of tenants who are currently struggling. To support these Davis residents, we recommend the following. First, the city should adopt a rent control ordinance that is more protective than the Tenant Protection Act. This rent control ordinance should apply just cause protections effective at the beginning of the tenancy and should impose a lower rent cap. This ordinance should also create an enforcement body mirroring what other cities, like San Jose, have created. Second, the city should improve its code enforcement by committing to higher rates of inspection and enforcement, adopting a more robust code enforcement ordinance, and advancing payment to displaced tenants when landlords fail to pay required relocation assistance. Lastly, we recommend that the city better regulate its rental market through the existing rental resources program. This should include expanding registration requirements to landlords, creating a method for tenants to register their units, and regulating the additional fees associated with creating a tenancy. We believe that improving these tenant protections would substantially address the housing insecurity that Davis residents are currently experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you to the public commenter. Do we have any additional public comments?
This is more of a question, but what barriers do you foresee in getting this to work, if any?
I think there could potentially be pushback at the idea of rent stabilization, because historically it's been viewed by economists as not the path, and as I described in my comments, I don't think that applies in the same way. There are new studies showing in New Jersey and in Massachusetts and different parts of California that this is working, and that's why it just got pushed at the state level. I think that there could be there could be complexities around establishing a rent board in terms of, we know that commission reform is on the radar. So what does that look like? When could we have it in place? Can we do all of these at one time, which would be best? Or would it be staggered based on some of the other constraints of the city? But I don't see a way forward where we shouldn't be advocating for this, because I absolutely believe that this is the right move for the city of Davis. So barriers, I think, are surmountable with strong policy, collaboration through commissions and city council, and public advocacy from people showing up.
Do we have any other public commenters? All right, we can open up for discussion. Very nice job, guys. Very thorough. I wouldn't expect anything less. No, but I am very impressed. You're laying the groundwork very, very nicely, so it'll be hard to say no.
One thing that I really appreciate is that even though I was initially concerned with all of the types of housing that don't fall under Tenant Protection Act and that cannot have rent caps imposed upon them, at first I was just kind of taken by that, what are we going to do about those? But then, we're hearing on what we possibly can do, and then I got really excited about the non-judicial body for review, because if that happened, community members, council members, city staff, and commissioners would constantly be hearing about the types of issues that are problems, and it would start to garner the types of attention that maybe one day could start to address the other, the limitations. So I just really am excited to, if that happened, have the conversations happening much more often and candidly. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right. Are we entertaining the motion tonight, or is that for next month?
So we want to revise this based on what Iris learns in the meetings that Iris is holding, or that were scheduled. And also, we really want to connect with the city of San Jose so that we can get some more inside information about how that works logistically within the city, and any lessons learned that we can pass on to our city council when they consider taking this up.
All right, so no motion.
No, there's no motion, but we don't anticipate this is going to change significantly. We're going to add to it. Is the point.
Yeah, great. I'll be interested to see what San Jose has to say. Rents there are not.
And I neglected to say, we did have one, public comment that came in from a Carroll Hill House, and it was included in the package, so it was in support of tenant protections.
Great. All right. Okay, let's keep moving on. So, commission and staff communications.
But I'll start with A, and that's how many affordable housing property updates. We've got 2 houses that are currently on the market and available for sale. We're still working through that process. A lot of what we learned tonight helped us to inform what will happen with the next for sale units. I will provide the social services and housing update. I'm going to start with the respite center because there have been some concerns about what's happening there. As many of you know, we opened the respite center in March of 2020, just as COVID hit. The city was fortunate in partnering with Communicare to provide staffing and operations at the respite center at the time. So now that we've had the site open for these 3 years, we've learned a lot, and there's a lot of change that's happened in the community as well. So there's some direction that the city would like to see happening at the respite center, and we've been talking with Communicare about what they're currently doing there, some of the things we'd like to see happening there. All of these talks were kind of taking place during a time when Communicare itself was actually undergoing a change. They merged with another organization, their Communicare Olay. So just in thinking about what's been happening, what we're seeing in the community with the changes that we've seen with the addition of Downtown Streets team and the addition of Paul's Place, we wanted to take a closer look at what's available at respite and the perception of what's available at respite. So what the city did is it released an RFP in December for an operator that would really kind of operate the respite center like a housing navigation center, which is more than respite, more than a place to just to kind of get out of the elements and to be do like the name says, have a respite area. We're looking for an operator that's got experience with managing a site, managing the facility itself, managing the clientele that's there, but also managing a number of vendors that will be providing different services at respite. So we're looking for someone that can connect to the county and make sure that people are getting connected to their benefits. We're looking for someone that can connect people to housing navigation. How do we make sure that you have all the documents that you need to apply for housing? How are we helping you to complete applications? What can we do to do that? How do we connect you to employment? How do we connect you to other things that you need so that you are on a path to self-sufficiency? So with that, we let Communicare know that we were going to be releasing an RFP. We invited them to apply as well to make sure that if they wanted to stay and if they were going to be able to meet that criteria, they're welcome to apply. At this time, they've chosen not to apply. We've got a number of other projects that with the merger and with they've got new projects that they're working on as well, so they chose not to apply. We are aware that a lot of staff that are at respite have had the opportunity to take other positions within Communicare, so they'll be moving on to other positions. But as we select a new provider, Communicare is committed to helping us with the transition. The staff will be available to answer questions. We're also going to be referring people to some of the, what CommuniCare does best, which is clinical work and connecting people to licensed therapists and licensed clinicians. And we'll be doing that through the CommuniCare's own navigation center, which is here at 600 8th Street. And they also have a clinic over at Sutter Hospital. And we're hoping that they'll offer service hours at the respite center so that people know that on certain days they can come and there'll be somebody from CommuniCare that can connect them to the services that they're used to seeing. At this time, we've gotten two applicants to operate the respite center. We're excited about them because both have extensive experience running housing navigation centers. Both of them have experience running housing navigation centers in West Sacramento. They're familiar with the clients that are already here in Davis. They're very familiar. Both are already working with a number of the clients that are here in Davis, so that it should make the transition much easier. At this time, the contract with CommuniCare ends at the end of January. We'll be transitioning a new operator probably in early February. There'll be some overlap as the two entities talk and they exchange case notes and what we did before and what you can expect. We are also working with the other providers that are here in town. We've let them know that we're making some changes over at Respite. So they're also meeting with a number of the clients that are out in the community to let them know that you still can come to see us at Paul's Place through Davis Community Meals and Housing. A number of clients are already working with Downtown Streets team. So people are aware that as we make the transition, there are still other places that can provide services. Right now, for the month of January, as this transition happens, the respite center's hours have been reduced. They're operating from 8 to about 2 o'clock, as opposed to from 7:30 to 4 o'clock. And we don't have Saturday hours at this point. But we expect that all of the full hours to return in February, when we have the new operator and the Saturday hours. There's also a pet clinic that happens at the respite center. Those are usually on Saturdays. For the month of January, those will take place over at Paul's Place, which is just a few blocks away. They'll do them at Paul's Place until the new operator comes on board, and then they'll transition back to respite center. So the goal is to keep the clients centered as far as making sure that they feel supported, that they understand that respite is not closing. We're hoping to enhance what's available to them. Regardless, it's going to be tough because the folks at respite, the staff there, they're family. So, it's kind of hard when you see family members move on to other things. But the staff at CommuniCare has been great in talking with the clients, understanding that the conversations are very trauma-informed because these are people that have been traumatized by relationships changing. So they've been really good about trying to make sure that people feel supported. And one of the things that this current staff was very clear about, the respite center is one of the few places in town where we see a large number of community of color, people that are African American, Latino, and they heavily utilize the respite center. And it's in large part because the staff reflects who they are. So respite, the staff at CommuniCare has been very clear that whoever comes on board needs to make sure that they're focusing on equity, making sure that they are focusing on that community so that they don't feel like they're falling through the cracks. And we've had those conversations with both applicants, and they're going to make sure that they're centering that in all of the work that they're going to be doing. We think that's important too. So I just want to make sure I addressed everything that's kind of going on. We are anticipating that the new operators will be meeting with our volunteers. They'll be meeting with the volunteers are coming to Respite. We're not expecting, if you drive by Respite, you shouldn't see any kind of a change. And it shouldn't be really obvious to anybody that's just kind of driving by. But for the volunteers, we want to make sure that the new operator reaches out, talks with them, make sure that they're continuing to build relationships with the folks that are supporting Respite as well. So there's a lot that will be happening in Respite. We've got this, again, the RFP for the new operator. Council allocated $25,000 to do a facade improvement program, which basically means we're gonna clean up the frontage of the Respite Center so it doesn't look quite so sad. But that will be a community engagement program project that we're gonna work on with our city, I don't remember what Rachel's title is, I call her our art director. So we'll be working with, the neighboring community, with the Davis Manor neighborhood, to come up with a project to, hopefully it may be a mural to go on the front of the Respite Center. That'll happen as soon as the rain stops. So we'll be doing some community engagement around that. We've applied for a very large state grant. It's a Community Resilience Center grant. It's offered by the state. It's in 3 phases. There's a phase for planning. If you don't have a site, you don't know quite what you want to do, but you're thinking about doing something, they'll give you money to help you plan. There's a development portion where you've got a site, you've got site control, and you know what you really want to do, but you need to come up with architectural plans, and you need a community engagement plan. There's money for that. And then there's an implementation grant. If you're going to rehabilitate a place, they'll give you money to help you to implement it. We applied for the development phase, and we're hoping to hear back by March whether or not we get it. And that could be upwards of anywhere from $5 to $10 million. It's a very large grant. So keep your fingers crossed for that. But either way, we know that we'll be making improvements to the site. We'll be making improvements to the services. And again, they're a cornerstone of what we're doing here in Davis. Respite is here to stay. So that's my update on Respite.
Great.
Any questions? Yes.
You said there were 2 contenders. Will that be announced next month?
Yes. So right now, we've just received the applications. They're under review. We're going to have an interview process. Once we make a selection, then we'll announce who was on board. So, and we're doing this really fast. We know it's really fast, but we will have that all in place before the community care folks leave. And then the last thing, the pit count. Our pit count's going to take place this Wednesday. We'll be meeting at 6:30 and going out into the community at 7. The process is led by the Yolo County Homeless Poverty Action Committee, HPAC. HPAC is responsible for making sure that the pit count takes place. They've said that we've done a training for all of the volunteers and the staff that's going to be going out and conducting the pit count. We'll be doing a census of people that are living in places not fit for human habitation. That's where we go out and just actually count the number of people that we see on the street. There'll be some interviews that we'll be doing with some of those folks. There's a survey that we'll be conducting. We'll be using our phones to kind of conduct the survey. We'll be on our phones and we'll be asking questions. That the unsheltered count will take place on Wednesday. The sheltered count of people that are in temporary shelters, because we can count people if they are in emergency shelter or in hotels. That's not considered permanent housing, so we can count them. That will happen the rest of the week. So we'll be compiling all of that data, doing all of that work. The city is partnering with Davis Community Meals and Housing to help us with the process. We've got a new partner with UC Davis. UC Davis is also going to be conducting a count of students that they are aware of that are unhoused and living in places not fit for human habitation. So we'll get a kind of sub-count for those folks too. And then once all of the data comes in, it all goes into HPAC. It all gets the data gets scrubbed, essentially, to make sure that it's clean, that we don't have duplicates. Once the data is clean, then it will be submitted to HUD, and then HUD will validate the count, and then we'll be able to publish the outcome. That takes a while, and that's why I'm thinking, hopefully, it'll be around June. So, that's our kid.
It's gonna rain on Wednesday.
Yes. But we're expecting that, we know. And we're using, a lot of our existing outreach teams to, go out and count. Part of that is helpful, because we know that people will be in their tents. So we'll be able to catch them and include them in the count. We've talked to Caltrans, we've talked to the railroads, we've talked to PD, and asked them not to clear any camps for that morning. So that, and the great thing is our city homeless outreach team has developed a mapping tool that they use using GIS. So we have a very good idea of where all of the encampments are in town. And so when we go out, we'll have a map, and we'll be going to all of the encampments that we're aware of. So, and we'll also be partnering with people with lived experience, so that they'll be going out with us and going, you might want to check over here, you might want to check here too. So all of that will be happening. So we expect that we'll get a pretty good camp this year. We'll see.
Closing thoughts, anyone? All right, Happy New Year. You're adjourned.
Thank you so much.
That's great news about the rest of the
Yeah. We're
It's
excited.
almost 10 o'clock, so I didn't ask any more questions, but are you worried at all about the gap in service? Because that's
It's
what
just-
what people have been.
Yeah, no, and we're not, because the service providers are already working with that community. The biggest thing is just.
I like that you mentioned the vet care as a
Yes.
mainstay.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's rare that care is available, or if it's very well utilized, but
It is, from what I understand, is they, because most of our folks have pets. They all have dogs and stuff, so they see them on, they come every month.
the only other thing that I know you know is the concern I've heard, maybe from two people, is they don't like to enter a place with a gate that closes behind them.
Yeah.
And like maybe fixing the facade will make it more welcoming and get them over the idea that they're going to prison.
Yeah. But again, that's one, but in some cases, it actually makes people feel safer, because it's not like they're going in and going into a room that's locked. It's this huge facility with people that are welcoming them and everything else. There are predators out there that prey on people out in the community, so it's a safe place for them. So,
My daughter interviewed her.
Food and shower.
yeah, maybe
Healthcare.
absolutely.
Thank you.